Welcome to the FNO InsureTech podcast, a place where movers and shakers from all points within the insurance ecosystem gather and discuss all things InsureTech. We talk about how technology and innovation are affecting and driving change in the industry. Here are your hosts, Lee Boyd and Rob Beller.
Hey, podcast world. Welcome to a very special edition of FNO InsureTech, your place to learn and hear about all things InsureTech. I am your co-host, one of many hosts on this show, Rob Beller, and I'm here with the one, the only, the kind of big shot guy, Lee Boyd.
Hi, Rob. How are you today? Welcome to the show.
I'm good. I say you're a big shot for a very specific reason.
Why is that? I have absolutely no idea.
Well, because, some people in our audience might not know that our company, 470 Claims, was recently acquired. Did you know that, Lee?
I was told that. Yes.
We were recently acquired by Alacrity Solutions. We are now part of the Alacrity Solutions team and the Alacrity Solutions world. And once they discovered that they had Lee Boyd on their staff, well, my goodness.
Oh, we're just telling stories now. Just telling stories.
They couldn't be more excited, and they have you running just pillar to post doing things, don't they?
I'm loving it. it.
Yeah. What are you working on today?
Today, well, it's actually like five different things all at one time.
Just the big one. What's the big one you're working on? Come on, say it.
Well, I don't know how much we can say yet. There's going to be a big announcement. I don't know if I'm allowed to say what I'm working on yet.
Okay. Well, I'll just, in respect for your secrecy and confidentiality, I'll just say that you're working on a big training center announcement.
That's true. A big training center announcement to bring training to the world of insurance claims and beyond.
That's right. And your friends at Alacrity Solutions, of which Lee and I and Alicia and Al are all your friends from Alacrity now.
Yeah.
We'll have a big announcement for you about training for claims professionals.
That's true. I do think it's important to say that I actually don't do anything with training. That's all done by a wonderful team themselves. But I am today involved with helping them out.
And you want to know what?
What?
There will be people in the training center who will be getting paid and getting money coming into their hands from different insurance companies, right?
Yeah. That's exactly right. They will be.
And those payments will be coming to them through various and sundry channels, many of which will be controlled by our guest's company.
Well, I can't wait to hear who is our guest today.
Our guest is Chris Ewing, CEO and co-founder of One Inc.
I mean, it's a really cool company. I have to be honest, I didn't know a lot about it until I started researching really about the guest today. But it's all about payment and digitalization and customer experience and really speeding up payments from insurance carriers out to the insureds. It's a InsureTech at its core. And today we're going to get to learn about how they really come in and revolutionize the way that insurance companies pay claims and even more.
Our crackerjack content producer, Alicia Moss, got One to agree to be on our podcast, which was a great move because I think all of you will be really interested and really fascinated by what's going on in insurance payments, strictly insurance payments. What's happening? What are the realities? What are the problems? And how big the space is? And you'll have answers to all those points and more when you listen to our interview today with Chris.
Yeah, it's going to be great. I'm very excited to talk to them about it.
And there's one other reason why I'm excited to talk to him. You know what that is, Lee?
I do, but why don't you tell us again?
Chris is a homeboy.
A home, but what do you mean by that?
He is here in California, here in Sacramento, California, which is
Oh,
where I live and work from.
yes.
Chris is also, he's down the road in Folsom. That's right. Folsom as in Folsom Prison. It's
Folsom
where
County.
Folsom Prison actually is, just down the road from me. And so it's really cool that I get to do an interview with somebody who's just down the street. That never happens.
That never happens. I
So
love it. I think
it'd
it's
be
great.
like it would be like for you interviewing somebody in Waco. Could you
Which we
imagine
never
that?
have. I've not interviewed anybody from Waco yet.
We've done interviews from Waco.
We have.
We actually did do an interview in Waco with Kat Reese.
We did one, and I was thinking today, it's been over a year since you and me have been in one room at the same time doing a podcast.
Well, that's funny that you mentioned that because it's also been a year since there's been a global pandemic. I wonder if the two have anything to do with each other.
That is possible.
It's possible. We'll think about that.
Yeah.
We'll think about that offline. What do you say?
I think everyone wants to listen to the interview.
Here is our interview with Chris Ewing, co-founder and CEO at One Inc. Hey, everybody, we're here with our very special guest today. And like I said in the intro, very exciting for me because a local boy from here in the Sacramento area, Mr. Chris Ewing, the CEO and co-founder of One Incorporated. Welcome to F&O InsureTech, Chris. It's nice to have you on.
Hi, Rob. It's great to be here, and it's nice to talk to a fellow Sacramentian.
Yeah, we don't get to do that real often, do we? We usually have to either get on a Zoom call or get on a plane and go somewhere.
Exactly. And, it's interesting because I think Sacramento should be a great growth area for tech because it's close to San Francisco, and I think it's getting better. But you're right. It's nice to be able to do it at home.
How big is that area?
If you take the whole Sacramento region, it's like 1.2 million people, which is quite large. Yeah, they were going to incorporate Sacramento in Sacramento County, and it was going to be like the 8th largest city in the United States or something like that. It's a large area, yeah.
We kind of sit in the shadow, though, of the Bay Area. Is that fair to say, Chris?
Yeah, I think absolutely. In a lot of government work here, and there's been a real desire, since the 80s to really bring technology companies to Sacramento. And it's actually really gives me a lot of pride to be able to build One Inc. here. And, as we grow, it is, one day we'll be One Inc. Arena, and that will be the final stamp on our success.
That'd be awesome.
You're in Folsom. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Do you live out in that area of the valley?
Yeah. Offices are in Folsom, and I live in Loomis.
Okay. So, for those of you who are listening all over the world to this, Folsom is where Folsom Prison is, as in the song, right?
Exactly.
And it's still going today. It's operating. It's a good old prison out there.
I'm a lawyer by trade, and I had a reason a long time ago to go visit a client's son there. And so I have been behind the walls, and it's an interesting and scary place.
Yeah.
I would think so.
I'll digress for 1 second. I had a next door neighbor who was a prison guard, who was a guard there for like 35 years.
Wow.
He was the most pleasant, calm, chilled out person you'll ever want to meet. And he was a guard, in the population at Folsom Prison for all that time. Lots of interesting stories, needless to say. But that's not why we're here today. We're here today to talk about One, and that's what we're going to do. So let's jump into that, Chris, and let's start by sharing with everybody what the heck One is, unique name, and what you guys do.
Sure. So One Inc. is an outgrowth of some other operations that I ran. So I started out, as I said, I was a lawyer, and then I really wanted to get in the insurance business. So I became co-founder of 2 managing general agencies in an insurance company and helped run a large retail brokerage firm as well. And what we noticed at the time was there was a lot of software and use cases in the payment space that were not being handled by traditional banks and other, kind of legacy banking players. And so as we started growing our businesses, we started building a lot of these things ourselves. And so, when you think about taking a payment from a bank and applying it to a policy or billing or claim systems, those are the ERPs of the insurance space, there's a lot of things that you need that is not offered by just that payment rail. So for example, reconciliation and routing, PCI compliance, security, digital engagement, a whole bunch of things that can be in that area. And so we started building all of that stuff ourselves. And I literally was sitting there one day and I'm like, why is it that one vendor doesn't do all of this stuff? Because we would have problems with, our IVR on a phone system, or we'd have a problem with our mobile app. And so I said, one company should do all of this stuff. And that was kind of the aha moment where I was like, well, we should just create a company called One Inc. and do it all. And literally that's where the name came from.
One that does it all, you might say.
Exactly. The power of one. So that's what we did. We sold the other assets that we had in 2010 and 11 and 12. And I kind of had the choice of going out to run other insurance operations or go into software because I thought there was a big opportunity. And the rest is history, as they say. We really started focusing on the payments business in 2014 and really found that on the inbound side, when you go to make a payment to an insurance company, you go on their website and make a payment. You go onto the mobile app and make a payment. You call on the phone and make a payment. We found that there were a lot of things that we could help in those transitions by digitizing all of those activities and helping the carrier with PCI and especially reconciliation and other treasury functions, because we were operators. We really understood that piece of the business. And then as time went on, we realized the biggest use case of all is paying insured's claims digitally by sending them instant payments immediately rather than sending a check. And so that's been the big shift in our business, was when we started focusing on that a couple of years ago.
So you're the PayPal of insurance payments?
Yeah, I would say we're the PayPal, Stripe, and Legacy Bank, and the new kind of IVR and digital engagement company. We kind of do all of it, back to that kind of concept of one company should do it all. So we have a whole lot of software that helps in any way you can take or make a payment with an insurance company. We have software and assets to help them do that.
So whenever you're dealing with insurance companies, what is it you're actually digitizing there that was kind of antiquated back in the day? What have you actually come in and done? A paper check, like taking a paper check, now able to take it direct deposit?
Yeah, so there's a bunch of things on the inbound side. So we really have two sides of our business: inbound premium payments and outbound claims payments. On the inbound side, you're exactly right. Most payments were made, and still are, believe it or not, by paper checks being mailed into the carrier. So they have a huge goal of transitioning those paper checks into digital payments, getting people to make payments on the web, getting people to make payments, over an IVR 24 hours a day. And a lot of those assets, believe it or not, carriers, large carriers, when you think of Progressive and Geico, they all have a lot of this stuff. But the smaller carriers, because of a lot of the legacy technology platforms, they are AS400s built in the 80s, don't have a lot of mechanisms to take those digital payments. And so they have to go, it's very difficult for them to do it. And then as we've transitioned, making sure that they're in PCI compliance, and that's kind of on the inbound. So moving everybody from paper checks and paper processes on the inbound side. And again, the biggest and kind of easiest target is claims payments. Over 80% of all claims payments made today are made via check. So if you take the example of, your home getting hurt by an earthquake, the insurance company will do an appraisal, mail me a check. Then I get this check and it's made out to the lien holder. So I got to mail it to the lien holder, and then the lien holder's got to sign off on it, mail it back. It takes 5 to 6 weeks. So that whole process is really antiquated. And so you got to scratch your head and go, why is it possible that in 2021, 80% of checks are still made, 80% of claims payments are still made via check? And the answer lies that it's actually very difficult to do all of the use cases. That's one that I just talked about there. And so there's a lot of regulatory, legal, just different ways to make payments that you have to do so that you can solve all the use cases. Because if you can't solve them, then of course you still have to send a check. And so that's the most exciting part of our business.
80%. Like you, I've worked in the insurance industry for a long time, so that number doesn't surprise me because it's the insurance industry.
Yep.
I mean, so in other words, you have this enormous opportunity. Whatever progress you guys have made as a business, you still have 80% of the business waiting to happen.
It is an absolute drop in the bucket. So we now are processing, 15, 16 billion in payments, which is up 100% over last year. And we're on target to grow over 100% this year. And that's only, it's a $1 trillion inbound claims payment opportunity, another 1.5 trillion outbound just in the US alone. And we are the leading provider of, this whole suite. And we're winning 90% plus of the deals that we're in. We won in the last 6 days, we've won 5 of the top 15 insurance carriers in the US. So
wow.
You've had a good week. This is a good week.
It's a big
we've
week.
had a fantastic week. Yeah. Not only are we growing, we're growing really at almost exponential pace because we're focused on one industry and we only do that industry. We only focus on insurance. We only solve use cases and problems and build software for insurance. And so it's hard for other vendors. You mentioned a great one. PayPal is a great payment software, but they can't solve everything for insurance, whereas we can.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You brought up the issue earlier of having a mortgage on a home, and I did a quick Google search where it says about 62% of all homes have a mortgage. And I've had a couple of claims, and my mortgage is on there. Is that something that you can overcome and actually do digitally, or does it have to have a check?
No, it's really cool. So the way that the normal process works is, like I said, let's say my home, my floor gets ruined in an earthquake. They send out an appraiser. They approve the payment, right? That, hey, we got to pay somebody to fix the floor. It then goes to the lien holder. The lien holder then makes a decision whether they're going to monitor it themselves or they're going to let me make the payments. Most of the time, they let me make the payments, so they mail the check back to me. But that process right there takes 6 to 8 weeks because
it's forever.
Sure.
It takes forever. With our system, we send a digital notification to the insured, me in this example. I click on a link and approve it. It then goes digitally to the lien holder. The lien holder within 24 to 48 hours digitally approves the payment. We digitally instantly send the payment to me, the insured, and then I pay the vendor, and I can even choose to pay the vendor digitally. So the whole process now can be started in 24 to 48 hours versus 5 to 6 weeks. So just think about that from the cost perspective of the insurance carrier. While I'm not in my house because the floor is all broken, I'm in a hotel, and then I need, other incidentals. I'm unhappy because I'm waiting for the house to get fixed versus, for 5 to 6 weeks versus somebody uses Nuco who uses our product and they're in their house. They're at least working on getting the house repaired in 24 to 48 hours. And it's just a much better process. That's a great use case. And yes, our system can do that. And we're, I think, one of the only systems in the US that can actually do that digitally.
Yeah, I mean, that is a huge deal. You hear complaints all the time about waiting for the mortgage company to send back the check. And in the claims world, any small issue can grow huge, especially if you have ALE involved or if they're, anything like that. So being able to overcome that is just a massive, massive thing.
Right. So one of the real value propositions that you offer is speed.
Cycle times. Yeah. Cycle times is the most correlative thing to loss ratio severity, right? So if you can decrease cycle times, it decreases expense for the carrier. It increases happiness for the customer. And it all is caused, all the delays and most of the claims process are caused by checks. So our goal is to get rid of all checks. And, even another use case, which is shocking is, let's say my car's totaled. I need to now get a payoff demand letter from the lien holder, and I send a notice, the insurance carrier sends a notice to them. That payoff demand is only good for 10 days. So if it doesn't get back and then isn't paid within 10 days, the 10 days starts over again. So I got to ask for another one. And we've had instances where it's cycled for, 60 days through that. And meanwhile, the insurance company's paying for storage at the body shop. So all these processes are being, caused to be delayed and causing extra expense for the carrier, unhappiness for the insured because they can't get their car or their house back. And it's all because of a check. So we got to get rid of checks. And that's what we're doing now. And we're having just a huge amount of success in that area.
And so are you able to somehow or another, and I'm sure, you have a bunch of brilliant people working there. Are you able to somehow or another show the insurance companies, this is the kind of savings you're looking at. This is the kind of financial impact we might be able to have on your processes. If you institute our process and our product, you could stand to save this kind of money.
Yeah, there's a bunch of ways to show it. And we do an ROI analysis and show them. But, the first is just the plain old shipping, managing, printing of checks. It's really expensive when you actually break down all the costs. It's anywhere between $3 to $9 a check. Just even getting rid of that for a digital free process is a huge ROI. But then when you add in that the cycle times and and customer happiness, it is just such a no-brainer, right? Basically, every carrier, Strategy Meets Action just did a research of personal lines carriers, and 80% of those carriers are going to be making a decision around digital claims payments in the next 24 months. So not only are we trying to get rid of the 80% of carriers are trying to get rid of it. So it's really an industry that is just exploding relative to this particular issue. And there's a bunch of other ones like it that we're talking about that we can help with, just even paper bills. Yeah.
So your real problem is going fast enough.
I'm glad you said that. Our problem, we're obviously a much, much different company than Tesla, but I kind of almost akin it to that, to the team. We don't have unlimited demand, but effectively we have unlimited demand. So our goal needs to be really to focus on how do we create repeatable, scalable processes on our delivery line. So I have worked in a manufacturing company before, so I always use this conveyor belt analogy and say, look at, what are the things along the conveyor belt that it takes to get us live, and how do we make those faster, either from the product so we can remove things that we need to do on the product side, or make it easier for the carrier to integrate with us, like using accelerators with people like Guidewire or Duck Creek, because that automatically does the integration, and then making the product configurable in the UI. We have a true SaaS product. And so there's just a whole bunch of things that we're trying to do, along with scaling our delivery team and making sure that they have the processes and procedures. So we're in an interesting place, because the goal right now in the company is scaling, moving fast enough to have the opportunity to capture as much of the market as we can, because we have a great product. We have great product market fit. We have almost 200 customers, which is in insurance is a tremendous amount. And
that's a big number, right?
It's a big number. Yeah. So we're growing very fast. So yes, we need to make sure that we manage the company really well with discipline and in our processes, and we're getting there. It's going very well.
So you don't just get involved with the customer side or the insured side of it. Talk about how else you guys move money around and who else you pay.
Most of the use cases are around insurance. They either make payments or they get paid, and that's probably 85% of the use cases. Sounds pretty simple, but it requires a lot of software. But then we also do escheatment processes. So when somebody loses a payment or doesn't find a payment, we can then send the money to the state and do escheatment, which is a pain for Treasury. We also can do intercompany payments or subrogation. So when one company owes another company money, we can do that digitally rather than send a check back and forth between them. And then, we just talked about, we also have the ability to pay vendors, not just insureds. We have the ability to pay participants as part of the claim. So whenever there's a claim, there's oftentimes a payment to the insured, but then there's a payment to the participating vendors, the body shop or the contractor. And those payments can also be digitized as part of our process. So there's a whole ecosystem of payees and payments going around that our platform can support.
When you talk about digitized, define that.
It's interesting that you brought that up, because for years you hear everybody saying we got to digitize, but what does that really mean in the insurance context? Because we already kind of have, we make payments on the web. The answer is really quite simple. It's removing all paper processes and paper checks. And so what are some of the biggest use case paper processes? Well, number one is mailing people bills. That's the biggest paper process that it still exists today. And most bills are still sent over the mail, right? So it costs a lot of money, takes a long time, can get lost, and none of us read our mail anymore. So it's ineffective.
Right.
So that process we can also digitize. So we can digitize mailing out the payments, but then we can also take those bills and digitize them and put them online. So when you log into your insurance portal and you see your bill and your past payments and your ID cards and all of that stuff, that also is our platform taking that data from the core systems, either the billing, policy, billing, or claim system, and then turning that into a digital, information on, in those assets. So that's one of the biggest use cases. We've talked a lot about paper checks. And then there are just other paper processes that carriers do. Refunds and commission payments is another area. So commission payments to
agents.
Agents and brokers, right? They
Yeah.
get a check. Well, with our process, we can now send them digitally a payment. And, even medical providers. The other interesting thing is we're not in any particular one line of business. With our 200 carriers, we have literally every line of business covered, from medical insurance to disability insurance, life insurance, commercial insurance, personal lines. But there's different use cases for all of those.
It really doesn't matter. I mean, all of them are involved in payments. That's kind of the
It's all
stock
digital.
and trade of insurance. I just want to point out real quickly that Lee has the lucky job. Historically, we just recently sold our company, but historically, Lee has had the job of going to the post office
Yeah.
and picking up the checks every day.
Picking
right?
up all of the checks.
And Lee, just quickly, a big day, what would you pick up there?
We could pick up, 300-400 checks, individual checks and individual envelopes for an individual claim.
Yeah.
And that's just, I don't think that people realize, maybe people listening to our podcast realize how many payments in a day an insurance company does.
Oh, it's unbelievable.
Chris, it must be a stunning number.
In the aggregate, it's about $3 trillion a year that is flowing in and out of insurance companies. Somebody once said, I don't know, it's anecdotal, but every paper dollar in the United States flows through an insurance company at least once a year. So
Wow.
it's just a huge, many people have said it's the largest vertical industry in the world. And certainly in the US, it is just a massive, massive amount of money. That's $3 trillion that's trading hands every year and getting bigger.
Mm-hmm. And so your reason for being is to make that easier
and faster and cost a lot less money. But if you think about what's wrong with paper processes, is not only is there paper, but think about it. You got to take those checks. Now, what do you do with the checks? You got to scan them in. A lot of them don't have a policy number on them. Now you got to find that. There's so much inefficiency around paper processes that is kind of, it's the tip of the iceberg kind of principle. And so when you really add up back to your ROI question, how inefficient all of this stuff is, it really adds up to something that's got to be fixed and digitized, and we're right in the middle of it.
The timing is finally caught up with your product. I'm sure for a number of years you were hearing from insurers, because we know insurers and we know how they think traditionally, how they have thought, and that is to say, well, there's nothing the matter with checks. Checks are great.
For many years, we would go to people and we would say, hey, we want to talk to you about your payments and your payments problems. And they'd say, we don't got a payments problem, go away. And you're right. The industry now is thinking of payments as a strategic initiative to which really, if you think about, let's take a big step back. If you think about insurance, what is insurance? You promise to pay me money, and if an event happens, I promise to pay you money. It is just the heart of insurance is payments. And so if you're doing that in an inefficient or an expensive way, it is going to mess up the insurance experience. And so it took a long time for people to understand, wait a minute, that's true. And the industry now has really shifted where it's a strategic focus around insurance payments. For many years, all of the analysts didn't even have payments as part of their things to analyze. And so now that's changing. So it's pretty insightful, Rob, that you noticed that. It's true. And now there's this big switch where everybody wants to know about payments. And so it's making Kathy's job a lot easier, but certainly there's a lot of work to do there just to get in front of people and make sure that they know that One Inc. is the best partner.
Whenever you're talking about payments, I mean, it's more than just money from a bank account to another bank account. There's got to be some customer experience built into this. I mean, is that something your company's doing? Is it helping really improve the customer experience for the insurance carriers?
I'm glad you brought that up. So insurance typically has some of the lowest scores for customer satisfaction, right? Mm-hmm. And if you look at the industries that have some of the highest, you get people like Amazon and Netflix. And we kind of took a step back and said, well, why is that? What makes Amazon so special? And one of the answers is you never need to call them, right? You can go online, you can track if your package doesn't arrive. And by the way, they're incredibly great at getting your package here. But if it doesn't show up, you can go online and you can self-service. You click on a link, you find out where it's at. You can make a request to, change the shipping. they're very, very, very fast at fixing it. And so self-help is really part of it, and getting answers digitally is also part of it. So we see the long-term, our long-term job is to help remove customer service from the insurance equation, meaning that people can help themselves. And so we have, for example, as part of our product offering, we have a full website that includes all of the information that somebody needs to find out, for example, why their premium went up, or did the payment go through? And that's all customer experience. And it's getting that data to a insured in the way that they want to do it, whether it be on a mobile app or whether it be on Alexa, which is a new thing that we're working on, or whether it be over the phone or even at night when nobody's there. So we kind of handle all of those use cases. And then we're very good at getting data, because we really started out as a data company, and moving data from legacy systems, even AS4, old AS400 systems, we can make them act in a new digital way that carriers just think aren't possible. They'd have to update the core. Whereas we can just get the data out and then display it in all of these new, innovative, cool ways. And that's really digitization is ultimately about self-help. People can go online, get what they need, find out the answer, make a payment, get the documentation they need without having to call somebody.
Right. And, you're doing all these things. We were talking earlier about how it's such a need. Everyone needs this, right? And I was reading back in December that the company did a press release for a strategic expansion of the senior executive team. I was going to see if maybe you could talk a little bit about what have you done to prepare for all of this demand in your service?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, scaling a business from a small company to a medium company and ultimately to a large company requires, different skill sets at a different time. And so as we are growing the company, we want to make sure that we have people that have scaled companies and executives that have scaled companies through, from 50 million to $1 billion in revenue. That's a different path and a different launch than going from 0 to 50 million or even 0 to 10 million. They're equally hard. And so it's not that the current, the executive team that we had, which is still almost all of them are still with the company. It's just, we want to bring in people who have gone through that growth. And you said it earlier, that can really help accelerate the time on the company and make sure that we can, from a product and engineering perspective, we can go live much quicker so that, we can fulfill our promises, as well as on the delivery side, make sure that we can work with these large insurance companies. As you know, they're very difficult to work with, and getting people that are skilled at working in an enterprise level environment is very important. And so Jig Patel, who we just hired as our president and COO, he was the CIO and COO at IBM and at First Data, and has a huge background in terms of scaling some of those businesses. And then Kathy, who has joined, she comes to us from TSYS and has just an incredible background on the marketing side. And then, Kevin, who heads up our sales, he's been really excellent at scaling the business on the sales and marketing side. And then Paul came from, he was a CFO of a multi-billion-dollar unit of Microsoft. And so, we have real top talent now that can help grow the business to the next level. And then, our goal is to get to $1 billion in revenue, and we are on our way.
Is that challenging for you? It must be challenging for you because you were there at the beginning when it was 0, right?
Yep.
And so, like you said, it's one skill set to go 0 to 10, another one to go to the next level, That must be challenging for yourself.
Well, it's very challenging. If, along the way, I realized I need to change as an executive. And so I got to figure out what are skill sets and what are the important things. I'm still learning, right? But what are the things that CEOs of growth companies that are really scaling, what do they do and how do they operate their business? And I've had some real fortune in being able to talk to some friends at Google and other companies and mentors about how to do it. But it has been a thoughtful exercise to figure out, well, what do I need to change as a person and an executive to match what the company needs? And it's very difficult. Not everybody can do that. There's people that I've worked with in the past that want to act in the same way that when we were 5 people, and it just doesn't work because of the sheer number of people, and communication becomes much more difficult. We have 450 employees around the globe, and growing, right? And so communication and the management methodologies that you use are totally different than when there's 10 people and you walk in a room and you just say, hey, we got to get this done, and everybody hears you and can do it, especially in the world of COVID, right? Now we have to manage remote employees. Nobody can go into work, and it adds a whole new challenge. And so we are an OKR, or objective key result managed company. We adopted that about 2 years ago. That's what Intel had kind of come up with to manage as they grew. And so, yeah, it's been very challenging, but really fun because it's makes you grow as a person and as a leader.
So I want to get back to customer experience for a minute. I'm a big fan of that, and try to stay very focused on it.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to us about, what does this mean for the insured? What does one mean to the insured?
Yeah, the biggest thing that insureds want is information. And that's what we all want, right? Whenever we have a lack of information, it causes frustration and fear and all kinds of stuff, right? So when you want information, the quicker you can get the information and the less humans you can talk to, the better. I have this theory, and I haven't had a chance to kind of really look into it. But I think if you look at the mental energy that is required to talk to another human versus the mental energy it takes to go online and look up something, it's like infinitely quicker, which is why our kids all use texting and don't talk on the phone anymore, is because
Right.
for our brains, it's just easier. So we want to make it frictionless, right? We call it frictionless. We want to make it so that the data is available in a digitized way, any way that they want to look at it. So the problem in insurance, it sounds really simple, right? If you're building a new business today, it is. If you have a business that's been around for 100 years and you have 10 systems that were built in the 80s that have no APIs, their databases aren't even SQL, how do you get that data out of those legacy platforms and present it in a digital way that is effective? And that's really what we solve. We are not just a payments company. We are a digital migration company that allows legacy systems to act in the same way as a brand new system. So, if I'm a huge insurance company and I just bought Guidewire, that's easy, right? It's a brand new system. It's got APIs. We have integration accelerators and integration with them already out of the box. It works really well. But now you have half of your insureds on this AS400 that literally was built in the 80s, that is on premise and sitting there. How do you get all of that data out, do it in a PCI compliant way, and have a great customer experience? And that's where we come in. We are a bridge to both of those systems, the modern Guidewire, Duck Creek, Majesco, InsureSoft systems, and the legacy, old mainframe AS400 system. Those should present and act in the same way. And that's really what we do more than anything, is we provide that gap. And so if you go to Stripe or PayPal, they're great systems, but they can't handle those legacy platforms. And so I think that's where and all of the use cases that we've been talking about.
Right. They were all built in a new world, in a different world.
And insurance is still not a new world.
Right.
Don't we know? Don't we know?
So, I'm very interested, as we're getting close to the end here, I'm very interested in cyber risk. And you're dealing with all these legacy systems, you're dealing with these new systems, you have all these, you're the connection between all these things. I mean, what are you doing to make sure everyone's information is secure and safe?
Yeah. It's a really great question. So on the inbound side, we are PCI, well, on inbound and outbound, we are, PCI level 1, which is the highest PCI standard. We have SOC 1, SOC 2, both type 2s. So, and, HIPAA compliant. There's a lot of things that we do to comply with. We are in compliant with all the data requirements of both, in the US and even the European standards. So there's a lot of just practical things that you have to do to just get going. But what I think you're really asking is, how do we protect, especially on the outbound side, fraud from happening and cyber criminals from getting in and accessing that data? So we are in the cloud, so we also have, a whole team of people. All they do is focus on site reliability and security. And so we have been very fortunate. We've never been breached, and we never, hopefully never will be breached. But we also make it so that if a breach occurs, we do not have things like PAN data and social security data available even in our network. So we tokenize everything and make it so that it's not hacker proof, but it's very, very, very hacker resistant. And then on the payout side, we do some very cool and interesting things on making sure that you are the person that we are supposed to pay. let's say that we sent you an email and we authenticate you in a number of different ways, really kind of similar to what your bank does. We authenticate you to make sure that you are the right person. And then we even follow up with telephone calls, as well as we have some kind of almost AI type things that we look at and make sure that things add up. And when they don't, there's an exception, and then we follow up on those. So it is a full-time job in this world, making sure that we keep the data safe, because that's the most important thing, and then make sure we don't pay the wrong people.
A lot of people that listen to our podcast are from the tech side, from the InsureTech side. A lot of people are from the insurance side, but not a lot of people, much smaller group, have had a foot in both.
Yep.
You're an insurance guy, I would say,
Yep.
by upbringing, if you will. Earlier in your career, you were very involved in different insurance plays. And then you crossed over, and now I would say, wouldn't you describe yourself as a technology guy today? Talk about that transition moving from one to another.
Well, it's interesting because in all the companies that I've started, I've had really the same skill set that I've applied. And that is, I've always been a technology person. So I was a developer in college. So I love software, love development, love everything about technology. I became a lawyer because everybody in my family is a lawyer. And then I did everything to do to not be a lawyer, which is, I started a chocolate dip strawberry company to get out of being a lawyer. But even there, and insurance companies, and even what I do today was really the same thing. I'm good at sales, and then I'm good at building product to match problems in the industry from a technical perspective. And so even early on at Cherry's Berries, we were the first vendor to integrate on the web completely with FedEx. So we could send an order, it would come in, it would connect to our system, it would connect to FedEx, and it would spit out a label, and off it would go. It sounds pretty rudimentary, but that's what we did. And then in the insurance world, I really looked at insurance entities as technology companies first, and obviously actuarial and operational problems are just as important, but the technology can help solve a lot of that. So I really have had a background on both sides of the technology and the business side from day one. But it is a totally different world when you're just focused on software relative to insurance. And the hardest thing actually is getting carriers to realize that what you have can help, because a lot of times software vendors can't, they say they can help, but they can't deliver. And so I think that's one of the things that we've done really well. We've never lost a customer so far, knock on wood. And that's because, our product works and we deliver. So.
Yeah, I would say that insurance people are kind of dubious by nature.
Yep, risk averse.
And that's what they do for a living. And so why not shop for products in the same fashion? I mean, we find the same thing, and in our particular segment where we work, historically, there's been a lot of disappointment. But in software too, there's been a lot of disappointment. Like you're saying, that promises are made that are not kept. How have you guys gotten past that? I mean, the fact that you're still around and you're still kicking. How old is your company? It's 9
Yeah,
years old?
we really started in the payment space in 2014.
I mean, you're InsureTech before there was InsureTech.
It's funny. Somebody told me I was an InsureTech, and I didn't even know there were InsureTechs. So so it was kind of cool, because we went from being uncool to very cool overnight. But the hardest thing, I think you hit the nail on the head. Having a foot in the insurance world, and being able to talk their language, and also being able to solve insurance problems is a huge advantage over a vendor that is across verticals.
Yes.
So if you're doing utilities and you're doing insurance and you're doing something else, you just don't have the time and focus to solve particular insurance problems. Whereas we only focus on insurance, and therefore we're only solving use case problems in insurance, and that's it. And so our product over time gets better and better and better. And it is very much a chicken and the egg. How do you get customers to trust you without customers? And once you start to scale, it gets a little bit unfair. And I think we're now at that point where you just become the trusted leader, so everybody just uses you. And so that's starting to happen, which is really exciting. But you're right; it took many years. It's of flying to people and meeting with them, and promising we can do it, and then actually executing and living up to your word.
Yeah, but you didn't. And I think another advantage you have, like you said, you hit the nail on the head, I think, and that is that you figured out what the problem was coming from it as an insurance person, you said, why isn't there one company that does all this, right?
Yeah.
And bada bing, bada boom, here you are today. I think a lot of times, or with some insurtechs that we see, not all by any stretch, not all, but some, they're put into the business maybe by their VCs or their investors. They're saying, you know what, you have a solution for an insurance problem. And that might be very exciting, but they don't even know what the insurance problem really is. You lived it.
Exactly. They don't really understand. So, the treasury functions of our product are very strong. And that's something you just can't wake up and build. You have to understand what the treasury problems in the insurance context are, and to be able to solve them. And it's a very unique industry with very unique technologies. And, for example, the policy and billing systems, they don't really have exports to the GL systems. And so the reconciliation solutions there don't work. And so, that's where, like you said, understanding that is a problem, and then being able to build software that solves it at a level of understanding that just takes years to get there. And so it is an advantage that we have. And we have another huge advantage, which is on the legal side. We really understand the DOI regulations, what the DOIs in different states want, and how to comply. And all of that just takes an enormous amount of time. And if you're just a software vendor wanting to get into insurance, it's very, very complicated. It's very, you can do it, obviously, but it is much easier if you are from insurance.
This has been terrific. We've loved this. We haven't had somebody on from your space. And so it's great to hear about it. And it's great to hear about it from a leader. I have seen your company at conferences for years and years and years. I think you guys do PLRB, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep. Yep.
But we see you there, and as well as others. And someday when this pandemic is over, which maybe we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel now.
We certainly are. Yeah.
Maybe I'll get an invitation to get in my car and drive out to Folsom.
Love to do it. Yep. As soon as you want, let's do it. We've got a great office, and we can go over to by the prison and have a great lunch.
I would love that. We could do a remote podcast from Folsom Prison.
There you go.
Well, thank you so much for being with us. We've really enjoyed it. And thanks to all your people who've made this happen. And we'd love to have you on again in the future as things continue to develop.
I'd love it as well. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Lee.
Thank y'all so much.
Lee, that was really a pleasure and kind of a little bit of a surprise. I was excited to have a local boy for me
Yeah.
on the podcast, but wow, that's quite a company. That's quite a big company.
It's a big deal.
That is a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, I was reading through all their press releases. They have a lot of really fascinating things that they've done. And with the decision to really ramp up the executive team, I mean, they have big plans and they're really going to go places. But like they said, they are a niche product in a giant world. These insurance companies have such a need to really get these payments out the door quickly and really as fast as possible, and to make sure that the customer experience is great. And I think that they're in a prime spot to do that.
Payments. What an enormous space payments is in the whole world of commerce, not just insurance. And one of the really smart things that I think they did was they didn't get distracted by going after payments in, mobile phones or God knows what. They stayed with insurance, and now it sounds like they dominate the category.
Yeah. And then I guess you got to think, insurance is so big. Let me dominate insurance, and then let's just see where I can go from there. Right. If I can do insurance, then I'm sure I can move in elsewhere. But yeah, it was a delight to visit with them. I just wasn't sure at first, whenever I was reading about the podcast today, I was like, well, what are we going to talk about? But I mean, they are a InsureTech. That's what we interview. And that is a prime example of a wonderful company in the world of InsureTech.
Right. I'm thinking about the other InsureTechs that we've talked to that, like Exact, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which of course is now part of Verisk.
Right.
But Exactware was an InsureTech, I mean, almost before there were laptops, right?
Yeah.
And certainly before there was InsureTechs. And this is one of those guys, or one of those companies that also fits in that category.
Agreed.
A grandfather status.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that, and I think it's meaningful. And this is something that I'll say to all the InsureTechs out there. I think it's meaningful to come from insurance. And if you don't come from insurance, then to make sure that it's in your DNA somewhere. Corporate DNA.
Agreed.
Okay, well, we thank Chris and his team, who's been so wonderful in working with us to get him on the podcast. And we thank all you for being with us and to listening once again to another interesting episode of F&O InsureTech. And with that, we will say
Goodbye, everybody.